A third of the people currently dying of COVID-19 in the UK are already fully vaccinated. A statistical effect probably causes the apparent paradox, explains Lars Fischer, but there is no cause for concern. A development is currently emerging in Great Britain which, after a few months' delay, will probably also show in Germany. An increasing proportion of those who died of COVID-19 had been vaccinated twice. What at a first glance seems to indicate a problem with the vaccinations is probably a statistical effect that is primarily related to two well-known factors: the incomplete protection of the vaccinations on the one hand and the increasing vaccination rates on the other. It was already clear after the clinical studies that the vaccinations did not fully protect against infection. The BioNTech vaccine Comirnaty, for example, reduced the number of infections by 95% compared to the control group. That's good, but not perfect. At the same time, the vaccination completely prevented serious disease and deaths. In fact, this is only partially true, because the studies only incompletely recorded the most vulnerable groups. People with a weakened immune system, such as cancer patients or organ transplants, like the elderly, generally have an increased risk of developing COVID-19 and dying. And there are many indications that the vaccinations in these groups do not protect against serious illness and deaths as completely as the figures in the studies on healthy people had shown. Fully vaccinated persons also die in the risk groups, albeit less than without vaccination. The Delta variant may also increase this proportion. In contrast, the likelihood that young people with a healthy immune system will die from a SARS-CoV-2 infection is very, very low anyway. However, the risk rises dramatically in the risk groups, which are not for nothing called risk groups. The mortality in relation to all infections, if you take the figures from certain reviews, in 25-year-olds in the range of fraction of per 1,000, in 85-year-olds it's 15%. The exact numbers are controversial, the basic facts are not. The risk increases roughly exponentially with age. As a result, vaccination campaigns in many countries first focused on the most vulnerable groups. Because of the huge differences in mortality between young, healthy people and the risk groups, the imperfect protection provided by vaccinations has a major impact. If vaccination were to reduce mortality in 85-year-olds by a hypothetical 95% instead of 100% as in the studies, they still have more than 50-fold higher risk of death than unvaccinated 25-year-olds with the above figures. At the same time, the vaccination also gives them less protection from infection than one would expect based on the study data on healthy people. This leads to the seemingly paradoxical result. The further the vaccination campaign advances, the higher the potential percentage of those who have been completely vaccinated in the corona deaths. Most of the people at increased risk are already vaccinated, but will become infected to a certain extent, and some will also die from it. The remaining unvaccinated people, on the other hand, are mostly relatively young with a correspondingly low risk of death. Even if the unvaccinated make up the majority of the infected, their contribution to the deaths remain comparatively limited, and it continues to decrease the more these population groups are vaccinated. This only appears paradoxical because it's easy to confuse with two different things. On the one hand, the probability that a person who has died of COVID-19 is double vaccinated. On the other hand, the reverse is the case, that a person who has been twice vaccinated dies of COVID-19. Both sound similar, but are independent of each other. Especially when the vaccinations provide very good protection in all age groups, which is currently indicated by a lot. The proportion of those who have been vaccinated among those who have died can increase significantly. However, the key indicator of the protection vaccinations provide is whether fewer people get sick and die among those vaccinated. And it sounds a bit confusing and maybe a bit scary, but in the end it is what everyone expected, because there never is 100% security. And only sticking to what we learned, keep your distance, wear a mask, that is helpful even if you're vaccinated. I will stick to that. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.